forensic experts and fresh evidence may have finally unmasked Jack the Ripper's true identity. Hit the subscription button and ring the notification bell. This way you'll be the first to learn about the updates that appears on Inspiring Stories several times a day. More than a century ago, Jack the Ripper roamed the streets of London. Indeed, he terrorized one of the city's most downtrodden areas with his violent crimes. The horror of his killings has long haunted people around the world because no one ever figured out his identity. But that may have changed thanks to a small clue left behind by one of his victims and the modern forensics that helped uncover it. Immigrants from Ireland, Russia, and Eastern Europe flooded into London in the late 1800s. More specifically, they moved into the capital city's East End neighborhoods, including Whitechapel. With more and more people cramming into this area, housing and working conditions plummeted. In addition, extreme poverty in the area was rife. Such dire circumstances bred desperation. Whitechapel especially became a hotbed for robbery, alcoholism and violent crime. The neighborhood even housed 62 brothels by 1888, as women in the area turned to prostitution to make money. All the while, the public looked down on this part of London, and the emergence of Jack the Ripper only strengthened those points of view. It remains unclear just how many murder victims Jack the Ripper tallied. Indeed, many Whitechapel women experienced violence at this time, so it's hard for experts to attribute crimes to him with complete certainty. 11 murders occurred in the Whitechapel neighborhood between April of 1888 and February of 1891. Of those deaths, most experts agree that 5 came at the hands of the infamous killer. The London-based serial killer earned his name from his gruesome modus operandi. This included slashing and mutilating his victims, sometimes from head to toe. At first, some theorized that Jack the Ripper may have had some sort of medical or surgical knowledge based on the way he cut and removed his victims' organs. Annie Chapman, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Ann Nichols, Mary Jane Kelly, and Elizabeth Stride all lost their lives to Jack the Ripper. After his first kill, Nichols on August 31, 1888, the serial killer's crimes became increasingly gruesome. Stride's death was the only exception, although authorities believe something interrupted him in the midst of the intended mutilation. London Metropolitan Police used plenty of resources to try and find the violent man behind these crimes. They had officers on the ground in Whitechapel, going door to door and asking residents if they knew anything. Detectives gathered forensic material from crime scenes, and they spoke with potential suspects to either eliminate them from the list or press them further with more questions. In addition, the head of the Metropolitan Police's Criminal Investigation Department, Robert Anderson, asked for help from Thomas Bond, the police surgeon at the time. Specifically, Anderson wanted a written opinion of Jack the Ripper's skills, background and potential motives. Bond's resulting criminal profile is the earliest known record of such an investigative tool. As reshared in the Ultimate Jack the Ripper sourcebook, Bond wrote that Jack the Ripper did not have surgical knowledge. Indeed, in the surgeon's opinion, the killer didn't even have the expertise of a butcher or slaughterer. He did, however, believe that the murderer kept it himself, succumbing to periodical attacks of homicidal and erotic mania. On top of that, Bond hypothesized that the serial killer may have had a homicidal impulse from a revengeful or brooding condition of the mind, or that religious mania may have been the original disease. Ultimately, though, the police surgeon stated that his latter two ideas seemed the least likely. Some other potential theories developed outside of Bond's profile, however. Because most of the crimes happened at weekends or during holidays, some theorized that Jack the Ripper held a normal job during the week. But it's possible he lived, and therefore killed, in Whitechapel when he could. Others wondered if the serial murderer came to the neighborhood for kicks but lived in a better area. So many theories appeared because the story of Jack the Ripper had made its way into newspapers around the world. As a result, it seemed every reader had an idea of their own. The Whitechapel murderer was not the world's first serial killer by any means, however. His crimes, though, do mark the first time that such a spree made international headlines. Not only did the press sensationalize the killer's crimes, but they also helped solidify his nickname. First, the Manchester Guardian identified the murderer as a notorious character known as Leather Apron. Some media outlets ran with this description and name, but rival newspapers waved it off as speculation. Later, Leather Apron faded into obscurity when the Central News Agency, and, later, Scotland Yard, received a letter from a person claiming to be the killer on September 29, 1888. Within its pages, the letter threatened a future crime. Moreover, some details fit with the Whitechapel murderer's next kill, leading authorities to believe in the message's authenticity. To finish, the author signed off the note with the name Jack the Ripper. So, once a newspaper published the letter, the notorious East London serial killer became known as Jack the Ripper. His graphic nickname only stoked the intrigue and mystery surrounding his crimes, and that has yet to dissipate, due in large part to the fact that no one ever faced charges for the 5 gruesome murders he supposedly committed. Once Jack the Ripper's killing spree ended, his crimes did incite change in East London and its many overcrowded neighborhoods. In just 20 years, the majority of the city's most notorious slums had disappeared. Indeed, after clearing out the residents, officials had many of the buildings destroyed. But Jack the Ripper didn't disappear from people's minds. Instead, the shrouded figure of a serial killer took on a nightmarish persona. Children thought of him as the bogeyman. Later, films imagined what he might look like too, often presenting the cold-blooded killer in normal clothes, an average man with a very dark secret. And of course, no one could actually portray Jack the Ripper with any sort of accuracy. All fictional imaginings of the killer were just that: no one knew his true identity. Over the years, in fact, experts have tried to reopen the case and test some of the evidence using DNA analysis. The letters Scotland Yard received, for example, have returned inconclusive results from genetic tests. But according to a recent forensic discovery, the identity of Jack the Ripper may finally be revealed. It all started in 2007, when Russell Edwards, a businessman, attended a Bury St Edmunds-based auction in England. He had his eyes on a particular item, a blood-stained shawl, said to have belonged to Catherine Eddowes, one of the Ripper's 5 victims. According to Edwards' account in the Daily Mail, the shawl appeared far prettier than any artifact connected to Jack the Ripper might be expected to be. In spite of the accessory's bloodstains, it had a delicate pattern of Michaelmas daisies, Russell said of the wrap. The shawl had further links to the Jack the Ripper case, according to its previous owner. His ancestor had been a police officer present at the murder scene and had taken it from there, Edwards revealed. This claim hadn't been substantiated, but the businessman still knew that the gruesome relic would be his, even if it came at a hefty price. All Edwards wanted to do with the shawl, he said, was somehow to prove that it was genuine. He failed to contemplate what else it could reveal, though. I certainly had no idea that this flimsy, badly stained and incomplete piece of material would lead to the solution to the most famous murder mystery of all time, he claimed. Everything changed for Edwards once he enlisted the help of Dr. Jari Louhilainen, an expert in assessing the DNA evidence left behind after historic crimes. Louhilainen agreed to analyze the shawl in 2011. He then began uncovering the fabric's many unexpected secrets, much to the businessman's surprise. First, Louhilainen examined the stains on the shawl. According to Edwards, the geneticist confirmed that they weren't merely blood specks. Indeed, they were consistent with arterial blood spatter caused by slashing, exactly the grim death Catherine Eddowes had met, he wrote. But Louhilainen's research didn't stop there. Next, Louhilainen used ultraviolet photography to illuminate any further secrets invisible beneath the glow of normal bulbs. With that method, he discovered an unexpected bit of DNA, seminal fluid. The geneticist reminded Edwards that more testing was required before any conclusions could be drawn, but he still felt thrilled by the new potential evidence. Louhelanen's examination rounded out with a final discovery, which he determined to be a cell from a kidney. This would further tie the shawl to Eddowes. During her murder, Jack the Ripper slashed the organ from her body, so it would make sense that those cells appeared on her shawl. With all of this genetic information revealed, Louhelanen had to extract some of it for further analysis. He couldn't use cotton swabs, however, as is the norm today. With such an old piece of evidence, the geneticist instead relied on a technique known as vacuuming. With a pipette, he gently gathered DNA from the fabric without damaging its historic threads. Next, Edwards said that he tracked down a descendant of Eddowes, Karen Miller. She then handed over a DNA sample. When compared to the 6 samples that the geneticist gathered, Miller's profile proved to be a perfect match, Edwards said. To him, that proved the shawl belonged to Jack the Ripper's 4th victim. And of course, that meant the seminal fluid on the shawl could very well be that of Jack the Ripper. So, Louhelanen carefully removed the DNA in the hope that he'd find surviving cells. With the help of another expert, Dr. David Miller, they supposedly found the evidence they sought in 2012. Now, all they needed was a suspect with whom to compare the killer's genetic code. With the extensive research completed, Edwards had a suspect in mind. Moreover, the Metropolitan Police had once honed in on him too. 23-year-old hairdresser Aaron Kosminski lived a mere 200 yards from the spot where Elizabeth Stride, Jack the Ripper's 3rd victim, met her fate. He shared a home with his sister and 2 brothers, but all was not well for Kosminski. Edwards wrote, "What is certain is Kosminski was seriously mentally ill, probably a paranoid schizophrenic who suffered auditory hallucinations and was described as a misogynist prone to self-abuse, a euphemism for masturbation." He went on to say that the hairdresser lived out his life post-investigation in mental institutions. The coincidences were too much for Edwards to ignore. "I became convinced Kosminski was our man and was excited at the prospect of proving it," he wrote. So, once again, he tracked down a descendant of the hairdressers, this time a distant relative of his sister, to gather the DNA required for a scientific comparison. The process, however, proved to be a difficult one. As Edwards described, amplifying and sequencing the DNA from the cells found on the shawl took months of painstaking work. But the end result, he said, made it all worth it. 7 years after I bought the shawl, we had nailed Aaron Kosminski with a perfect match, he claimed. Edwards first shared his story in 2014. But it made waves again in 2019 when the team's research appeared in the Journal of Forensic Sciences. The piece, co-authored by Louhelanen and Miller, made public their findings related to the shawl. Through their article, the scientists reiterated their belief that one-time suspect Kosminski had been the killer all along. In a press release from Leeds University, Miller claimed, "I was able to identify body cells that were consistent with the presence of seminal fluid on the shawl and which enabled us to match DNA with the descendants of one of the suspects, Polish immigrant Aaron Kosminski." He and Louhelanen then also explained how they determined the blood belonged to Eddowes. Although Edwards felt thrilled by the team's findings, others who read their study didn't feel as enthused. According to Rolling Stone magazine, some argued that there was no evidence of a shawl at the scene of the murder. Plus, they said, the DNA used to link Kosminski to Jack the Ripper was inconclusive. On the other hand, Kosminski had undeniably shown up on the list of potential suspects. The investigators' notes definitely include his name. Plus, an eyewitness witness once came forward to say they had seen him attack a woman who would later become a Jack the Ripper victim. The person later changed their mind about testifying, though, so the potential murderer walked free. Eddowes' shawl also got some attention from skeptics. The fabric and material appeared too delicate and high quality for a prostitute to carry around, especially one who, just 24 hours before her death, had sold her shoes. Once again, there appeared to be a logical explanation to put the wrap at the scene of the crime. The shawl's fibers traced back to the St. Petersburg in Russia, which put the garment far out of Edo's reach. However, Kosminski had immigrated to London from Poland, a country under Russian control, when he left. That bit of history meant the young hairdresser might well have had access to the beautiful textile. So, the mystery has not been solved, at least according to the skeptics. However, as far as Edwards is concerned, he has completed the task he thrust upon himself in 2007. As he wrote in the Daily Mail, "I wanted to provide real answers using scientific evidence. I'm overwhelmed that 126 years on, I have solved the mystery." We hope you enjoyed the video. Please let us know which one of these stories you found the most interesting. And if you like the video, click on the subscription button and turn on notification so you will be the first to know when we put out a new video. We thank you for watching, and we hope to see you next time.